Hello everyone. Today we are meeting to discuss something interesting. We are going to meet our HOS, Mr. Vardan Kabra, who is visionary person as well as who is wonderful writer also. I must say that you are a really good presenter also, sir.
Thanks.
So I would like to talk something about your book writing journey and your experience regarding how to write a book.
So I think to me, education has been a passion for many years, for almost 2 decades now. And I think for me to get into education, the whole idea was to change the way we look at education. I have studied in multiple schools, and I can say that I found education exciting only in small parts, and I felt that education, learning can be so joyful that it needs to change the way we are delivering it today in India and probably across the world also. A lot of questions are being asked about that. So I think this book is an effort to reimagine how education should be delivered in schools, how we should be looking at it.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. I know you very well. I feel you're a really good presenter. You present your ideas fantastic and fantastically. So I just wanted to understand why book.
I think that's probably part of my other dream that I want to be an author.
Oh,
So I've always wanted to be an author. So I think that plus the fact that if you have to get into the depth of something, I don't think it is possible to do it in detail without it being a book. I mean, you want to show research, you want to show data, statistics, all of that. I would want to use other medium also to present the ideas from the book, like we are doing today right now with this video. But I think if you really want to understand the depth of it, probably the a book is the way to go.
is book writing fun?
I want to say yes, but in reality, I don't think it is not. I think it is a very lonely affair because essentially what you're doing is you're sitting in one place. You have to write. Keep writing words and words. And I know I have had occasions where I've stared at the screen for 2 hours and barely written 25 words. But on other occasions, I've written maybe 500 words in an hour. So I think a lot of it depends on. I think I say this often. Inspiration strikes you when it deems fit. So I mean, it's sometimes you get inspired and you're writing the words flow in that. Even though this is non-fiction, but I think it's still the flow, the challenge. I mean, is always there in making a coherent piece of what you really want to convey in terms of your ideas. And it also required a lot of research. So I've tried to use wherever possible, try to use real life examples, talked about them, especially where there are changes in education, where something innovative is being done. So all of that also took a lot of time and effort to put it together.
I know you always ask for statistics and data for anything. So I'm pretty sure that this book must be having a good backup research for the thing.
I think I would say yes and no. There are things which can be backed up by data. So, for example, what are the employability or unemployability statistics? I mean, right now for college graduates in India, or what are the interview techniques being used by recruiters today? So, there are some statistics on those areas, or say literacy rates. I mean, there is a Pratham does this ASAR study every year or every 2 3 years. So some of these statistics are very much presented, but a lot of it is about ideas. Say about skills being far more important than content in today's world. Now, because this hasn't been done at a large scale or even in small scales anywhere in India across the world. So those are not backed up by statistics. Those are more backed up by anecdotes, by our experiences at say Fountainhead or whatever I've seen otherwise. So yeah, I think it's a mix of both data wherever possible, but also ideas and observations where needed.
Mm, that's great. India is moving, we are growing, and modern era. You have talked something interesting about skills. Could you please discuss more about skills versus content?
So I mean, we do this orientation with parents every year. I mean, new parents, and we take them through this quiz, asking them questions from their 10th standard and how much they remember. And typically, the percentage is like 2 out of 10. I mean, that's the average score. Most of them, actually, it's 1 out of 10 is the average
Oh
score.
my
That's
god.
the kind of things that people remember from their schooling days. And I think this is not is not just one incident. It is about, this is a workshop I've been doing for 15 years. The results are consistent,
Okay.
absolutely consistent. And when you move this from just content to application understanding, application of say quadratic equations, or say photosynthesis, or some history or geography concept, it is even worse. It is basically zero. I mean, that's the kind of understanding. So I think this was, memorizing information was perhaps a need when you did not have access to technology and everything at your fingertips. It's no longer the need. It's no longer something that we practice.
Hmm.
We only remember what we need to use in our day-to-day life, or what we are experts at. Those are things that we remember. Otherwise, everything else is a big blur. Anything that we studied in school or college. So, an education system that focuses on just memorizing content and giving exams is not going to work any longer. The only thing that is going to work today is building skills which are transferable, and yes, specialization skills also for a specific. So let me give an example. Let's say if you're studying computer science, yes, obviously you need to learn how to do programming and solve, write algorithms and so on and so forth. But you need transferable skills of research, communication, critical thinking, social skills, a lot of these skills which are required in any field that you work in today. So the book is a lot about a lot about the focus that education needs to change from being a content heavy to a skill heavy, to a skill focused system.
Yeah. Thanks, sir. As per you, what are the key issues which are there in current education system, or there are some loopholes in the system which we need to address as soon as possible?
I think the biggest issue is driven from the. I think there are two big issues which are very related. The first is that we have very limited, good quality, low cost college seats available to Indian students. The moment that is the case, it means that there needs to be a meritocratic selection process, like the JEE or the NEET, or other competitive examination. The moment that is the case, or even if it is through board marks, now the CUT has come up, the central universities or entrance examination. Now all of this means that there is the board examinations or the competitive examinations are very high stake, and that they need to be very objective, so that they can be marked because if lakhs of students are appearing, they cannot be very subjective, because that leaves for open-ended marking. What this means is the whole schooling is preparing for the board examinations or the competitive examinations.
Sure.
So if these assessments don't change, the education cannot change. I mean, that is the reality. So the education, the assessments have to become far more holistic. They have to look at the skills that we spoke about, research and critical thinking and social skills and so on and so forth. It is definitely a lot more challenging to do it in a objective manner for lakhs of students. But I think the CUT I spoke about is a step in that direction, because
Sure.
it is not looking at board marks. It is only looking at, and there is only looking at the results of this exam, and there are more elements of critical thinking in that. It's still very much based on NCRT, but it needs to really upgrade and change from that, to become a lot more holistic. If you look at admission processes for top universities abroad, they're not only looking at your grades, or they're not depending on any one single competitive examination. SAT, for example, is no longer a requirement in many colleges, or it's optional.
True.
But they look at a holistic picture. They look at the students' essays, the profile, what they've done in school, and of course they look at the academic profile also. So I understand it's very challenging to do that in India at the scale that we're talking about, but I think it has to move there in that direction. Otherwise, we will be stuck with an education system that still is only prioritizing memorizing information over the skills that are really required in 21st century today.
There are a lot of jokes and memes we hear about sports slots taken by math teachers. और वो बहुत famous होता है. Being a math teacher, I genuinely feel bad for it.
Right.
So, according to you, what role a sports plays in holistic education of any kid?
I think we spoke about skills, and I think the other aspect that is hugely important today is attitudes and mental well-being, uh, and that is hugely affected by the physical well-being, which is directly linked to the amount of sports. It's not competitive sports, but just physical activity and
Activity.
sports that students engage in on a regular basis. Especially, I mean, I think the trend is evident across India. The moment students hit those grade 9th and 10th, everyone's focus from the school to society to parents is just study for the exams, study for the board exams. Any sport that they were doing joyfully or forcefully, either ways, basically comes to a full stop. And I don't think, given where we are today, for teenagers not to have physical activity on a regular basis is almost a crime. I mean, it's one way of seeing it. They have to have regular physical activity, and it's not just about physical well-being. The physical well-being impacts directly mental well-being. Sports field, playground is a great place to develop social skills, understand yourself emotionally, where you get angry, where you get upset, how to control your emotions, how to talk respectfully to your opponents, to your own teammates. I think sports is needs to be an essential part of every day's schooling for every kid in India.
What are the key issues you have identified and have jotted down in your books?
So I already spoke about the focus on content, but I think related to that is because you have a huge amount of content to cover in every grade, in every subject. Everything is driven by that. So your timetable is driven by that. Your slots are driven by that. Your exams, your mini assessments or quizzes or term assessments, everything is focused on, okay, have you mastered a certain content for that particular period of time. So I think breaking away from content breaks free so many more shackles of how education needs to be. Today, in the book, I've talked a lot about project based learning, something that we are also experimenting with at Fountainhead School.
Exactly.
And I feel that that's the way to go, because the focus is then not on content but on building real world outcomes. What is it that the world needs? So our students have our grade 7 8 students have been business consultants to small vendors, fruit vendors, vegetable vendors, etc., to help improve their business. Or it could be building science related outcome for a real solving a real world problem. So it could be any of these things. The content itself that they learn is not important, but it's the skills, scientific skills, it's the social skills, the business skills, everything else that comes along with it, that's really important. So I think if I focus on the pedagogical side, to me this is the biggest message, that the focus needs to be on skill development through genuine opportunities for students to authentic experiences, whether it's projects, whether it is situations, whether it is even going out and meeting people, visiting field trips, or putting together a project in the school. So that, I think, the other aspect I speak about is talk about is the regulatory issues that are related, that are there in the education system in India. But that's like a whole big topic and a separate topic on its own, and we could take it a little later.
What would you like to talk about the current education system we have? So let's say you need to give some suggestion to the policymakers, the lawmakers, as well as other all stakeholders like teachers and the principals of the school. What will be your suggestion for them?
I think the first thing is, I mean, while I was writing this book, the National Education Policy draft came out, and the final version came out in August 2020. I think the National Education Policy, from a pedagogical aspect, is very far-seeing. I think it is what the country needs. There's a lot of focus on holistic learning, on vocational programs, on skills. Now, however, this is a policy, and the education is a state subject. So while the central government can do a lot of things, but states also need to take a lot of action. But on the one thing that I can say is that there needs to be systematic reforms of boards of education, which include the central boards as well as the state boards, where the focus needs to shift away from the assessments that we spoke about to real world assessments and skills.
Problem-based.
That, I think, is a very big area that needs to happen. The second area I would say to policymakers is to recognize private sector as partners in delivering high quality education to not just, I mean, elite, to the elite, but to the masses. And I think there is already evidence of that in form of budget private schools, which account for 90% of the students in the private school scenario. So I think empowering them through various means is also what the government needs to do. Government should not try and do everything. It can monitor, it can fund, but the running of schools and delivering education is a very intensive, manpower intensive, it requires a lot of systems, which the private private sector is generally better in doing.
If we talk about education, and you have great experience in education field, so I'm pretty sure that you must have jotted down all the anecdotes and all the examples in your book. This book is for whom? Who are the audience of this book?
That's an interesting question because I wondered about it, but I think at one level this book is for every parent, every individual in India, because I think they need to understand a different paradigm of education. Uh, and I've seen that with so many parents that I've interacted with, maybe about 5,000 parents over the last almost 2 decades. I see that they understand the need for a change. They just don't know where to access that change. How do you? Okay, yes, great. I mean, as a parent, if I say that, okay, I understand that my kid needs 21st century education, but where do I get that education? And that's so therefore the second, I mean, large audience for this is the policymakers, the stakeholders, people who are influential in the education sector, private or public. I really wish that some of them would read and understand the big need for a shift in the way we educate our children.
So students can also read this book.
Absolutely, yes. Students could also read this book. If I mean, it may be the case that the student is already recognizing the challenges, the issues with the education, and they will connect very well with what's written in the book. The issues that are mentioned, timetable, issues with exams, issues with the kind of discipline systems that are used in schools, the kind of focus on, just memorizing. All of those issues are something that I would think most students today will be able to connect with. Uh, uh, that would be great if students can lead that change, that revolution that we need, the reimagining of Indian education, then nothing like it.
तो बच्चों को पढ़ते टाइम ये लगेगा कि बोल ये रहे हैं शब्द हमारे.
Correct. Absolutely.
While you were writing the book, you were having very clear thought. These are the topics which I want to touch upon. And while you researched, do you feel like there were some areas which were unexplored, which you explored during this book writing journey, and then you explicitly jotted these points also?
I think I had a structure in mind, but the structure, I mean, itself took almost 6 months to a year to evolve. I mean, it was more like, okay, this is one idea I want to write about. I wrote about that. I finished like that chapter, or at least finished a draft of that. And then it took a few iterations to figure out where it should be placed in the, flow of the book, where it made a lot of sense. And I had people who were, I mean, from school, most of them who were really helpful in giving feedback on the content and how the structure is like. So that really helped. I feel in terms of topic, I have not addressed a lot. I think one area is especially, and this is very recent because this is just 2 months back when ChatGPT came in. I have touched a little bit about technology in education, but I think something like ChatGPT was expected, but I didn't realize it would come so fast. I think it needs to be addressed in a far more detailed manner. Uh, uh, I think this is a conversation I have had with quite a few people. There seems to be very fundamental questions in education which are not yet answered. I mean, it's in some ways we see education as something which has been happening for 400, 500 years. But in reality, there are big questions in education which are unanswered. I will give you two simple examples. One as simple as what is the best furniture to be used inside a classroom. I would say that is also a question which is unanswered today, because it is not just about furniture. It is about what pedagogy, what cost, what is the life you're looking at, what sort of do you want collaboration in the classroom, can students move their furniture easily on their own. All of these questions need to be answered for various levels. And a second area, of course, I talked about, okay, how does technology make life easier to learn for both teachers and students? It's an unanswered question at this point of time.
Yeah. Can you tell me approximately how many times you might have read your book?
I I actually I can't say I've read it too many times after the
Oh.
after the but the drafting process and the finalization of the chapter, I would have read it, I think, 15-20 times. I mean, each chapter. After having putting it together, I think the other people have read it more than I have read it, which is great, which is great. And I think the general feedback is that, okay, yes, it makes sense. Maybe it's a little academic, maybe it's a little dense, but I think
That's what you
that's
wanted.
probably the way I write. I mean,
And that's what probably you wanted to keep.
absolutely. I mean, it's not a light fiction book. I mean, it's not an entertainer. It's not a thriller. It's a serious topic about I mean, it's a serious book on a topic that needs a lot more awareness and attention from everyone. And I don't think there is a book like this in India, or I mean, maybe I'm bold enough to claim across the world. I mean, I don't think it addresses each of the issues that we see in education in the depth that this does.
That's really great. Excited to read it. Yeah. So this is a very specific genre, as you already said.
Correct.
Book. And writing a book, already there are very less people who are really good in writing, or let's say they are really good with writing, but they would not want to spend almost a year writing in the book and changing and everything. And that also specific to the education. So you're very clear that even if I become a writer any day, I will write on this topic itself.
So first of all, it took almost 2.5 to 3 years to from the start of the process to the end of the process. I mean, it's finishing now, so it's almost a 3 year journey. Uh, Second, I think, as I said, I mean, I am an avid reader myself. I mean, so therefore, I mean, it was I think it's almost a childhood ambition to become an author. So I definitely wanted to put together, I mean, a book. I the Interestingly enough, I always say that I love uh, uh, reading fiction, but I would prefer to write non-fiction. So, although I read a lot more non-fiction now as well. I mean, I do read a lot of non-fiction as well now. But especially growing up till maybe I was 25, I was exclusively reading fiction. Uh, but I've always found writing non-fiction far more satisfying than writing fiction. So that's where, I mean, I think the passion of education and becoming an author merged together in the form of a book.
That's great. लास्ट क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम माय एंड, नायक मूवी के जैसे अगर समझ लो कि एक दिन के लिए आपको एजुकेशन मिनिस्टर ऑफ स्टेट और
Yeah.
एजुकेशन मिनिस्टर ऑफ इंडिया बनाया जाता है,
Yeah.
सो व्हाट विल बी द फर्स्ट चेंज which will bring in the education system?
I think the first thing would be to change the assessment system completely for the boards. I mean, put in a directive that, see, for example, CBSE is already moving towards competency-based, understanding, but a clear timeline and a very clear emphasis that it needs to move towards that in a certain time, and allowing for a few more boards of education. I mean, which can be far more, even more progressive, even more futuristic, would be the other thing I would do alongside. I mean, to change that. So that's has to happen for a mass change to happen, because otherwise, because assessment still has to happen, but it needs to be a lot more 21st century than 19th century. So that is one. And second, allow private sector to fully participate in education through any legal entity that is allowed in India. So whether it's a company, whether it's a non-profit, whether it is any other form, it should be allowed. And third would be focusing on funding of students, I mean, especially anyone belonging to an EWS student, EWS category, and allowing them to go to a school of their choice.
That's great. Visionary thought. Thank you so much, Vardhan sir, for sharing your insights and sharing entire journey of your book, Reimagining Indian Education. Uh, Wishing you all the very best for your book, and I'm pretty sure that this will be an eye opener for so many, be students, parents, teachers, all the policymakers, and this will bring a change and it will be a revolution.